Thanks to Hostinger for sponsoring this video. Are you looking for a reliable and affordable VPS hosting? Hostinger offers an exclusive Black Friday deal on their VPS subscription plan. You can get a 12-month VPS hosting plan for just $6.99 per month, which is a whopping 63% discount. But wait, there is more. You can also use my code, which is code with Ari, to get 10% discount on top of the discount that Hostinger offers. Don't miss out on this amazing offer and take your website to the next level with Hostinger's powerful VPS hosting. What's up developers, it's Dari here and welcome back to the third video of my Laravel Livewire video series, where we will stay on the topic of components because we're going to have a look at properties within them. Properties in Livewire are essentially variables that are defined within a Livewire component. Properties are very essential in Livewire as they allow us to store and manage data specific to each component. They allow you to create dynamic and interactive components by binding properties to input fields or other elements in the component's view. With properties, we can easily capture user input, display data from the backend, and manage data within Livewire components. They play a crucial role in building powerful and interactive web applications using Livewire. When you want to define properties, you basically define them in the same exact way as you define properties in PHP, right below the class definition. So since we're already in the task index, let's define one right here. Right below the class definition, you use the keyword public, protected, or private, but when it comes to properties in Livewire, they always need to be public because they need to be accessible outside of the class, followed with a name. Let's start with the name of $tasks. You do want to assign some kind of value to tasks, and in most cases, you want to make a database request to retrieve data, which you can then assign to a property task. If we once again think about how this is done in Laravel, I would say that you can define a constructor, right? In Livewire, it's named a little bit different, but the idea behind it is exactly the same, since we got to make use of a special method, which allows us to perform initialization logic when a Livewire component is first loaded. It's the same methodology as a constructor, but in Livewire, it's called mount. So let's define a new function named public function mount. Once again, the mount method will be automatically called when the component is rendered. Now, inside the mount method, you can perform tasks such as retrieving data from a database, setting initial property values, or performing any other necessary setup for your component. Now, what do we got to do right here? Well, let's make a database request to retrieve all tasks. So let's say that we want to set the value of this tasks. So we're referring to our public task property equal to the task model, where we're going to use the with method because we're going to add the user relationship to it and chain the get method to it. Quick note, remember that the mount method is only called once when the component is initially rendered. Now here comes a pretty cool feature that Livewire has to offer. In Livewire, you can automatically use variables from the mount method in your views by simply referencing them directly. Livewire handles the binding of these variables to the view for you. So we have defined our property named tasks. If we then open our task index page, replace our task index with curly braces and our variable named tasks, Laravel will automatically pass the task variable to the view, allowing you to access and display the data. So let's navigate back to the browser. Let's change the endpoint to tasks. And right here, well, it's not that clear, but let me select it for a moment. You will see that our task variable has been dumped on the screen. Now, if we navigate to my GitHub repository for a moment, you'll see that I have created the Livewire directory as well and a task index as well. So let's copy the entire div, navigate back to PHP Storm and paste it right here. And I need to get rid of this span right here. All right. Navigate back to the browser, our local host, refresh it, where you will see that we have outputted a simple box which should represent a task. So follow along for a moment, because what we're going to do right here is a bit of Laravel magic, not really related to Livewire. So inside our views directory, I would like to create a new directory named components. And I'm not going to cover everything regarding to components. I have a complete tutorial available for that, which I will link in the description down below. And inside of my components directory, I'm going to create a task-item.blade.php file. And I'm actually going to paste the entire task index right here. Once again, get rid of my span. All right. Then inside my task index, I actually want to get rid of everything that I just copied. Create a for each directive where we're going to loop over our tasks as one single task. And inside my loop, I want to call my task item component that I have just created by saying x-task-item, and we need to close it off. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh it, you will see that we have received an error message, which you will see quite a lot. So I got some explaining to do. The error message, Livewire only supports one HTML element per component, means that inside the task index, Laravel found multiple root HTML elements. Livewire components can only have a single root element, meaning that all HTML content within the component must be wrapped within a single parent element. Now let's solve this issue. First, let's pass in a variable to our component by saying task is equal to our $task variable. What we then need to do is copy everything in this file for a moment, create an empty div, and paste what we just copied inside of it. Then inside our actual component, which is the task item, we need to add something new, which is right after the class, and that is called wire::key, which needs to be set equal to a string. Now follow along for a moment, and then I'll have some explaining to do. We're going to pass in curly braces right here, and we're going to pass in the task ID. Now in Laravel Livewire, the wire::key is called an attribute, is first off required, and it is used to track and manage the state of dynamic rendered components of elements within a Laravel component. It helps Livewire to identify and update specific elements when the component is re-rendered. The wire::key attribute assigns a unique identifier to each rendered element of our component. In our code snippet, the ID is used to assign a unique identifier to each task item component based on the ID of the task. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that our error is gone, and since we have added 2 rows inside our seeder, you'll see that 2 rows have been printed out. I need to add a little bit of margin right here. So let's say margin bottom is 4. I think that should be all right. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Now let's change the dynamic data for a moment, just like it's Laravel. So let's say right here, we want to print out the task name, and well, that was actually it. If we refresh it, you'll see that task 1 and task 2 have been printed out. Now we set that the mount method that we have defined inside our, let me actually close off a couple tabs right here. It's getting quite messy. Inside our task index, right here, is a special method that allows us to perform initialization logic when a Livewire component is first loaded. But sometimes you simply want to pass in additional data to your view without actually defining a property for it. And it's pretty simple to do so, since you have used the same method in Laravel controllers. Let's go right below our render method, the title actually, where we need to chain the width method to it. We're going to pass in an array right here because you can pass in multiple variables. But for now, let's say that we want to create the text for our button, which will be new task. Now let's navigate back to our task index page. And let's say that we want to add a new button right above our loop. So let's say div. It has a class of text center and the padding bottom is 10. We're going to create a button inside of it with the text of our variable button. Once again, coming from the width method. And we're going to add a couple classes to our button. Let's say rounded MD. The BG is pink 600. Padding X is 4. Padding Y is 3. Text is small. The font is semi-bold. The text is white. Shadow is MD, and when it's hovering, the background will be pink 500. Finally, don't forget to hit the don't forget to add the type of submit to it. Now, if we navigate to the browser and refresh it, you'll see that we have added a new button right here named New Task. Now, let's quickly upgrade our code a little bit by creating a new component inside our components directory, where we're going to name it button.blade.php. We're going to copy the button that we have created, paste it inside of it, and then inside our task index, we're going to make a call to our X button. We're going to pass in one variable, which will be button, which is equal to our variable button. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we have not been prompted with an error message. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is data binding. Data binding in Laravel allows you to establish a connection between the data in your Livewire component and a user interface element in your view. It basically enables you to easily capture user input and update the component data without manually handling the input events. Now in Laravel, you can basically see this as something like the request object class, where you perform a request and you can use the data in your controller. The idea behind it is the same, but data binding is what I just explained times 10. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right above our button, we're going to create a new input field. The type should be equal to text. We're going to add a class to it, which is rounded MD. The width is 1-5, the border is 0, py is 2, text gray 900. For the placeholder, the text will be text gray 400 on small sm colon text sm colon leading 6. Then once again, follow along because we're going to add a new wire directive, which will be wire colon model, which is used for data binding. It establishes a connection between a user interface element, which is our user input field right here, and a property in a Livewire component, which we will define. But first, we need to set a value to it, which will be name. So let's open our task index for a moment, and right below our public tasks property, we're going to create a public name property. So right now, whenever we define anything inside our input field, it will be also linked to our name property right here. Well, not exactly, but we got one more step missing, because we somehow need to submit the input field to the browser, which makes sense, right? So let's open our button component, and let me align this on the line below. And right below our type submit, we're going to add another wire directive, which will be wire colon click, which we're going to set equal to a string. The wire click directive in Livewire is used to bind a JavaScript click event to a Livewire component method. It allows you to define a component method that will be executed when the associated element is clicked by the user. So whenever a user adds a new task, clicks on the button, we need to redirect it to our component, which is usually to a function. So let's say add right here. So the same flow as before. Let's open our component class. Then right below our mount method, we're going to define a public function add. And what I want to do right here is simply add a DD of our property of name. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we have added an input field. So let's add a task tree. Click on our button to trigger the wire click functionality, where you will see that our die dump has been outputted. All right, this is step number 1 of showing Livewire its power. We're going to advance step by step. So what will be the next logic? Well, you would say that we should do something with the name that we have sent to our Livewire component. And to be specific, probably persist the data into the database. Well, you are right, but that's something we will do in the next episode, where we will work on actions. For now, I want to move on to route parameters, which is also something pretty useful when it comes to components. Since what we have done right now was not working with a full page component. And that's something we will continue on doing. Later on, I want to have this screen right here, where we could add new tasks. But let's say that you want to show a detailed page of a task. Then you need to start working with route parameters. So Let's navigate to the CLI for a moment. And let's create a new Livewire component for a full page component, which will show one specific task. So let's say PHP artisan Livewire colon make tasks / task show. If we then navigate back to PHP store, open our web.php file, and right below our create route, we're going to create a new route, which will be to tasks / a route parameter of ID from our task show component. And we're once again going to import the. Now each ID right here will represent a unique task. So let's open our task component for a moment. So task show. We're going to define a new property. So let's say public task, but we're going to type into it to specify that the task property right here should be an instance of the task model. Then we're going to define a public function mount method inside of it, which accepts an ID, which is coming as a route parameter as we have set inside our route. And then we're going to set our property of task equal to our task model, use the find or fail method, and it should look based on the ID. So let's scroll down a little bit because we need to open our task show. Let's once again get rid of the comment. And what I actually want to do is basically say, well, h1, give it a class of font bold, tracking is tight, the text is white, SM will be text 6XL, and the text needs to be centered. And we're simply going to print out the task name. And once again, the task is coming from our property that we have defined. So let's navigate to the browser. Let's change our endpoint to, let's say, /1, where you will see that task 1 has been printed out. If we change it to task 2, you'll see that task 2 has been printed out. Now, one more thing, and I'm a huge fan of route model binding in Laravel, and that works in Livewire too. So let me quickly show you how that works, starting inside our web.php file. Instead of passing in the ID, we're going to pass in the actual task, where we need to make a small change inside our mount method, because instead of accepting an ID, we're going to type in our task to a task object, where we're not going to set our property equal to our model anymore, because that will be done behind the scenes. So we're simply going to set it equal to our task coming in. If we then navigate to the browser and refresh our endpoint, you will see that the output is still visible, but we have used route model binding over a simple route parameter. Now let's see a little bit more Livewire magic. In Livewire, the wire object refers to the instance of a Livewire component itself. It provides access to various properties and methods that can be used within a component. In any Livewire component view, a magic wire object will be exposed to Alpine.js, which you can access inside your component. So let's say that if a user, well, let me change the endpoint to tasks. All right. So let's say that if a user adds a name inside our input field, right? And we want to show the number of characters inside of it. Just imagine how long that would take in a framework like Vue or React. Now let me show you how long it takes in Livewire. Start your counter and let me know in the comments down below how long it took. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, open our task index right here, and let's define a span right after our input field. Let's give it a class of absolute -ml-6 and the margin top is 2. We're going to define a span inside of it, where we're going to add a x-text, which will be the wire object we just talked about. So $wire.name.length. If we then navigate to the browser and refresh it, let's type in a task name. So let's say task 5, where you will see that the wire object is counting the length of the name and it's outputting it directly, which is pretty cool. Now I want to wrap up this video where we talked about Livewire properties, route parameters, how to share additional data with views, wiring and binding. In the next video, I want to take a look at a very important topic in Livewire, which is the use of forms to actually persist, delete and update data. If you do like my content and you want to see more, please hit that like button, and if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.